Welcome to the latest episode of Branding the Experience, where we discuss ways where we can create environments where employees actually want to come to work and customers want to keep coming back. Hi, I'm your host for Branding the Experience, Ken Bader. I'm also the author of the book, The Formula for Business Success equals B plus C plus S, a discussion on brand, culture, and strategy alignment. But I don't want to talk about my book today necessarily. I want to talk about a great book that I recently read called The Outward Mindset by the Arbinger Institute. Now, this book was given to me as a gift from a friend of mine, Brad Houle, the CEO of CAHPCU. And what a gift it was, because this is one of the best reads I've had in a while. Now, it's the subject of our episode today, not only because of the book, but because using the outward mindset as a tactic in building our culture, and more importantly, in branding the experience for our employees, which I always espouse as our first step in branding the experience, is a great way to go, obviously, in thinking about how our actions, how our words, how our work affects other people, and then in turn also affects us. But I also want to share a particular story that was talked about in the outward mindset that I've been using lately in strategic planning for clients, because it's a perfect story that talks about the value and the importance of brand, culture, and strategy alignment in any business. Now, the story was about Alan Mulally, who was the CEO of Ford Motor Company in the mid-2000s. Now, when he took over, that company was losing about $17 billion per year. Now, that comes out to be a little less than $50 million per day. It's difficult for me to even get my head around that, $50 million per day, much less $17 billion per year. But when he took over, he instituted a few systems, and one of those was a business plan review meeting every week with his management team. And what each management professional, each executive was required to do is to come in with reports and have them color-coded: green if everything was okay, yellow if everything was seemingly all right, but we're running into some problems here, and red if we've got a real issue. Now, as with most cultures, things don't change overnight, and Ford had a culture of keeping problems to yourself, that if you actually voiced an issue, that meant your head, which is an interesting culture and a way of dealing with problems. But Alan Mulally wanted to make sure that people understood what the issues were, so that the organization can rally around and help to solve those problems. Now, one of the executives, who was Mark Fields, who was the head of North American operations, actually would have been in line for the CEO job had Ford promoted from within, but they hired Alan from Boeing. And so Mark here is already not feeling too good about his position. So him, as well as all of the executives, went into the first few meetings in the first month, and of course all of their files were green. And Alan supposedly said somewhere around the end of the month or the third meeting that, we're losing $17 billion a year. You mean to tell me that there isn't anything wrong at all in this particular company? But then, after that meeting, Mark noticed a problem with the tailgate on the Ford Edges, and he knew that could be a major issue, and not only from a strategic standpoint, but also from a branding standpoint. If there was a problem with hundreds and thousands of cars, that would be a real black eye on Ford, and from a PR angle. And Alan had made it really clear as the CEO that we were going to run a top-notch organization, and that we were not going to have any bad public relations issues if we could avoid them. But Mark, knowing the old culture, was frankly very reticent to come in with some red charts that said, hey, we've got a major problem with the Ford Edge, because he figured that would be his head. And so he debated with himself over and over on it, and then finally decided, you know what, my head's probably on the chopping block anyway because I didn't get the CEO job, so I might as well just go with the program and tell everybody the truth. So he walked into the next business plan review meeting, and sure enough, everybody else is coming with green charts and files, and here comes poor Mark Fields with this big red graph that talks about how the Ford Edge has a major tailgate problem. And everybody had a sigh of fear in this particular room because they felt, well, this is the end of Mark now, because he's admitting a problem. But what the CEO did, what Alan did, was clap and say, that's great transparency. Who can help Mark with this? And then all of a sudden, other executives started to rally around and said, you know what? We had a similar problem in another plant. Why don't I dig up all of the data on that and send it to you? Maybe there's a solution in there. And then somebody else said, I've got a couple of engineers that may be able to help with that problem. Why don't we send them up there tomorrow to your Ontario plant where the problem was and see if they might not be able to get to the bottom of this? And so they rallied around the problem. And then next week and week after, the problem was still red because it still wasn't quite solved. But Mark Fields had gotten up and kind of sheepishly said, well, it's still red. And Alan got up and said, you know what? It's the problem that's red. It's not you that's red. Now, the point of the story is they ended up fixing the problem with the Ford Edge, but also that began to change the culture, as well as the brand and the strategy. Because if you think about it, the outward mindset in that particular situation allowed them to, number one, carry out their strategy in a high level of implementation and execution. They were able to save their brand because if the Ford Edge had come out, and Ford already had a number of black eyes out there in the press in the mid-2000s, that would be one more withdrawal from the emotional bank account among Ford buyers and consumers out there. And obviously, it changed the culture to something positive and something where they could tackle problems. And two quick points that I think are important in terms of brand culture strategy, and in this situation, what that did for Ford Motor Company is, one, it changed the culture and the way of attacking problems so much and helped their bottom line that Ford was the only motor company during the Great Recession that didn't take funds from the U.S. government. They didn't have to. And number two, when Alan Mulally retired, I believe a couple years ago, the person that took over as the chief executive officer was none other than Mark Fields. So I found it to be not only a very intriguing story, especially because it was true, and not only a great example of the outward mindset and what it could do on a very large level, but also what brand culture strategy alignment can truly do for an organization. So I obviously highly suggest you grab a copy of The Outward Mindset, whether you're running a business that's an army of 2 or an army of 200 or 2,000 or 2 million for that matter, because there are some great tips, great stories, great examples of how to apply the outward mindset at your particular business. And of course, I encourage you to use it and my book to brand the experience and to create brand culture strategy alignment at your particular company. Thank you for spending some time with me today. Go out and grab a copy of The Outward Mindset, and here's hoping that you're branding the experience both for your employees and your customers at a very high level. Take care.